My daughter-in-law stood there, laughing with a drink in her hand, and said I reminded her of her maid, right there in my own backyard. I was wearing the same blouse I had on the night my husband proposed to me, and my son simply stood by, pretending not to hear a word. I just smiled, walked away quietly, and 2 weeks later I sold the very house they were living in and did something they would never forget. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe. And please share in the comments. What's one life lesson you believe everyone should know before it's too late? Thank you. Honestly, I never planned on attending that weekend's party. Not after the way Emily had been treating me these past few months. Little snide comments, rolling her eyes when I entered a room, whispering to Nathan that I was too old to keep up. But Nathan pushed me. It's just a few friends, Mom. Nothing big, he said on the phone, his voice tight like it always was whenever he tried to hide something. So I went. I ironed my best blouse. The one William gave me for our 30th anniversary, the one he always said made me glow like sunlight wrapped in class. I dabbed on some blush, tied my hair back, and told myself it was just a simple gathering. When I arrived, the backyard was already packed. String lights hung above, catered food was laid out, women in heels holding cocktails. Exactly the kind of people Emily liked to surround herself with. I barely had time to set down my purse when I heard her voice cut through the noise. "Oh my God, doesn't Carol look like Consuela, my old maid from Dallas?" she laughed. And not a small laugh. A loud, exaggerated one meant to pull others in, and they followed, their laughter spreading like wildfire through the yard. I stood there holding a glass of red wine someone had handed me, my cheeks burning as I glanced at Nathan. He was across the yard chatting with a man in a golf cap. Our eyes met and he looked away. That was worse than her words. My own son pretending it hadn't happened. Slowly I turned and headed toward the guest bathroom, locking the door behind me. Sitting on the closed toilet lid, my hands trembled as I stared at my reflection in the vanity mirror. My lipstick was smudged, my face looked worn. Not just tired, drained. And I thought, like I had many times before, that if William were still alive, none of this would be happening. Emily had started behaving like this after he passed. She used to put on a sweet act around me, but after he was gone she dropped the facade. I always thought Nathan didn't notice or maybe didn't care. But tonight proved it. He saw and did nothing. I splashed cold water on my face and waited until the noise shifted to the front of the house before stepping out. I tried to slip away unnoticed, but Rosa, our housekeeper, stood in the hallway folding napkins. She gave me a look, not of pity but of understanding. She said nothing, only nodded once. That was the moment when something inside me quietly shifted. It didn't break or explode, it simply moved, like a gear locking into place. I wasn't fully angry yet, but I became painfully aware that this house no longer felt like mine. I had raised Nathan here, cooked every Christmas dinner in that kitchen, brought William home here after his first heart surgery, and now I was being mocked in my own backyard by a woman who hadn't even been around when Nathan still had baby teeth. Driving home I didn't cry. I just drove in silence, both hands gripping the wheel, the street lights flickering across the windshield like static. Once I pulled into the driveway, I shut off the engine and sat there for a long time, the keys resting in my lap. I thought back to all the times I had defended Emily to my friends, saying, "She's just a little high-strung. She means well." But now I wondered how long I'd been lying to myself. And worse, how long Nathan had been lying to me. I didn't know then that Rosa would soon bring me something that would change everything. Something hidden away in a drawer that never should have been opened. That would come later. But that night, all I knew was this. My daughter-in-law had looked me straight in the eye in front of everyone and said I looked like her maid. And my son looked away. That's when I stopped being afraid of making a scene. Because the scene had already been made and they started it. I just hadn't decided yet how I was going to end it. The morning after the party I was still wearing the same clothes. I hadn't slept at all. Around 6 that morning I poured myself a cup of black coffee and just stood in the kitchen, my eyes fixed on the refrigerator where William's old fishing magnet still held up a faded photo of Nathan at 12, his face covered in cake. I kept replaying the night before, hearing Emily's voice slicing through the laughter and seeing Nathan's eyes drop. Over and over, I ran it through my mind as if punishing myself, trying to see if maybe I had misunderstood something. But deep down I knew I hadn't. By 8, Rosa called. "Can I stop by?" she asked, which caught me off guard. She never asked. She usually just showed up like she had for the past 15 years. "Of course," I told her, and 20 minutes later she was at my door, carrying a small tote bag and looking more serious than I had ever seen. She didn't sit down. Instead, she went straight to the counter, opened her bag and laid out a folded manila envelope. "You need to see this," she said softly. Inside were printed documents, bank statements, loan papers, and one that made my stomach drop. A second mortgage agreement. My name was printed on it, my signature too, but it wasn't mine. "I found it last night in Nathan's office desk drawer," she explained. "He left the drawer open while they were outside. I don't know why I looked. Something just felt wrong." I ran my fingers over the signature. It was close, but it wasn't mine. Whoever did this had practiced. My mouth went dry. Why would he do this? I whispered, though part of me already knew the answer. "Money. It's always money." Rosa nodded. "I think Emily pushed him. They've been fighting about renovations. She said things like, 'Your mom won't be here much longer anyway.'" Her eyes flashed with anger. "Carol, I wasn't going to say anything, but after what happened last night." I nodded, unable to speak. This wasn't just social cruelty. They were planning financially and not just waiting for me to die, but actively preparing to speed things up legally. I felt like I was drowning. "I don't know what to do," I finally admitted. Rosa stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. "You do know. You just don't want to be the kind of woman who does it. But she's already been that kind of woman to you." I blinked quickly. No one had ever said it so clearly before. Rosa had always been kind, always stayed neutral even when the tension in the house grew thick. But now she looked like she was ready to burn it all down for me. I picked up the papers, staring at them as if they were written in another language. "Do you think William knew?" I asked. "He always said Nathan was smart but too soft." Rosa hesitated, then said, "There's more." She reached into her bag again, pulling out a worn envelope with William's handwriting on the front. My name written in his careful cursive. "I found this tucked behind some books in the den. I think he meant for you to find it." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper written in William's neat, looping penmanship. It wasn't a letter. It was a warning, a journal entry. "I worry Emily's ambition is getting into Nathan's bones," he wrote. "She's not cruel. She's careful. And I think she's turning him into something he's not. Carol, if anything happens to me, promise me you'll watch her closely. Don't let charm make you blind." I clutched the paper like it was my last lifeline. He had seen it long before I dared to admit it. He knew what she was. Now I had proof. Legal proof, emotional proof. I wasn't paranoid and I wasn't crazy. They had made me feel like a burden under my own roof, all while smiling to my face. But that was over. "You're right," I said to Rosa, my voice steadier now. "I do know what to do. And I'm going to do it." That entire afternoon I paced my living room, the envelope in one hand, my now cold coffee in the other. William's words echoed in my mind. "Don't let charm make you blind." He always saw straight through people. At first I thought it was cruel he didn't tell me outright, like he didn't trust me to handle the truth. But I knew my husband, he wasn't protecting himself, he was protecting me. He knew I hated confrontation. Writing it down was his way of making sure I'd face it when I was ready. And now I was ready. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. So I walked over to the hall closet, pulled out the locked metal box where we kept our will, house deed, insurance papers, everything that truly mattered. I hadn't opened it since his funeral. The key was still on the same ring as my church fob. When I opened the box, the faint scent of old paper and dust greeted me. I went straight for the folder labeled Trust and Will, and flipped through its pages. There it was, clear as day. William had left everything to me. Full ownership of the house, control over all accounts. Not a single clause left anything to Nathan or Emily while I was alive. I sat down, spread the documents across the coffee table and just stared at them. For years I had convinced myself that Nathan was helping me, managing things, offering advice because he cared. But now I finally saw it for what it was. He hadn't been helping. He'd been slowly maneuvering for control, one quiet signature at a time. And that forged mortgage, it wasn't desperation. It was deliberate. My chest tightened as I reached for the last envelope in the box, one I had completely forgotten until now. A small brown package William had marked private. Carefully I opened it, expecting more legal documents, but instead I found a small leather-bound journal, his journal. The one he used to scribble in at night when he couldn't sleep, saying it helped him organize his thoughts. I turned to the final entries, my hands trembling. The first few pages were his usual ramblings. Stock market notes, mentions of his back pain, frustration over Nathan quitting his old job to start consulting with Emily's brother. Then I came across something that made my stomach knot. Emily wants Nathan to speed up the future, he wrote. She never says it outright, but I know exactly what she means. They want control. They're waiting for me to die and for Carol to give in. I wish I'd structured the trust differently. I thought giving everything to Carol would protect her. Now I fear it's made her a target. I closed the journal and pressed it against my chest like a shield. This wasn't paranoia or overthinking, it was real. They were coming after everything I had built. The home where I raised my child, the money William worked 4 decades to earn, my peace. I stood up and opened my laptop. I searched for the attorney William had used for the will, Stanley DeMarco. Though we hadn't spoken in years, his number was still listed. I picked up the phone, dialed, and when his assistant answered, I said calmly, "Tell Mr. DeMarco this is Margaret Whitmore. I need a private consultation immediately. No family present." She paused for a moment, then confirmed, "Tomorrow 10 a.m. As I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. Not rage. Not sorrow. Clarity. For the first time since William passed, I could feel him beside me, not just in memory but guiding my steps. In the words he wrote, in the documents he left behind, in the choices he tried to prepare me for. He saw who Emily was. And he knew that as much as I loved Nathan, he was too weak to resist her. But I wasn't. And I wouldn't. I wouldn't scream or argue. I would use facts, documents, and the law, the same quiet weapons they tried to use against me. I had more power than they realized, and they were about to learn just how much. I didn't sleep that night either, but not from grief, from planning. I laid out every document on the dining table like chess pieces. William's will, the house deed, the copy of the forged mortgage, his journal, even the envelope Rosa had found. I rehearsed what I would say to Nathan, not because I hoped to change his mind, but because I wanted to see his face when the truth came out. The next morning I dressed with purpose. Slacks, flats, and the dark navy blouse William always said made me look like I ran the school board. I wanted to look like someone fully in control. I arrived at their house just after noon, unannounced. Emily opened the door in yoga pants and full makeup, her annoyance barely hidden. "Oh," she said, forcing a smile. "You should have called first, Carol." I cut her off. "I need to speak with both of you. Now." Something in my voice must have caught her off guard because for once she didn't have a snarky response. She called for Nathan, and they both sat across from me at the kitchen island like teenagers about to get scolded. I pulled the documents from my bag and laid them down one by one. "This," I said, tapping the forged mortgage paper, "has my signature on it, except I never signed it." Nathan's face went pale. Emily crossed her arms. "You're mistaken," she said too quickly. I stared directly at Nathan. "Tell me I signed this. Look me in the eyes and tell me this is my signature." His mouth opened but no words came. "How did you get that?" he finally whispered. "Does it matter?" I replied. "You committed fraud. You used my name to borrow against a house that doesn't even belong to you." I slid the deed forward. "I own this house. Completely. Your father made sure of it." Emily scoffed. "We've lived here for years. You think you're just going to throw us out over some paperwork?" Her arrogance was astonishing. "This isn't just some paperwork," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is proof. And I'm giving you one chance. Tell me everything you've done. Be honest, and I might reconsider pressing charges." Nathan looked like he wished the floor would swallow him whole. His shoulders slumped, his eyes darted around like he was searching for an escape hatch. "It was only to cover the remodel," he mumbled. "We were going to pay it back." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You forged your mother's signature. That's not a loan, that's theft." Emily leaned in, her voice sharp. "You're being dramatic. It's not like we tried to kill you. You're still alive, aren't you?" That was it. I stood up. "You're right. I'm alive. And I plan to stay that way. Which is why, as of this morning, I've revoked Nathan's financial power of attorney. I already filed with my attorney. All access to the joint accounts is frozen. The house is being listed for sale this week. You'll receive formal notice within 48 hours. Emily jumped to her feet, her face flushed with anger. "You can't do that. You're punishing your own son, your family, over one mistake." I calmly gathered the papers. No. I'm correcting a mistake I made when I allowed either of you to feel entitled to something that was never yours. Nathan tried one last time. Mom, please. Can we just talk privately? Emily didn't mean it, we just got overwhelmed. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the boy I had raised, but a man who stood by while his wife humiliated me and who now wanted to negotiate only after he was caught. I thought of every time I had nursed him through sickness, every recital I sat through cheering him on. And now here he was begging for secrecy after trying to steal from me. I'm done with private conversations, I said. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that secrets are how people like you operate. I'm finished being polite. You have 30 days. After that you're out. As I walked toward the door, Emily hissed behind me, "You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a bitter old woman." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Better bitter than blind. I stepped out into the sunlight, my heart racing. But for the first time in years I didn't feel like someone's mother or someone's burden. I felt powerful. And I was only getting started. 3 days passed before I heard anything from them. And it came not as an apology or legal notice, but as a voicemail filled with Emily's screaming, like a tantrum echoing through marble halls. I played it twice. First for her words, then just for her tone. Nothing reveals a person more than how they behave when they've lost control. You can't kick us out. We built our lives here. Nathan's kids grew up in this house. You're destroying your own family. For what? Pride? You're disgusting, she shrieked. I didn't return the call. Instead, I forwarded the recording to my attorney. That same afternoon, I arrived at the house with a real estate agent named Marcy, a woman who clearly didn't tolerate nonsense and smelled faintly of citrus and ink. As we walked through the rooms, my rooms, I noticed Emily's petty attempts to make the house look unappealing. Clothes on the floor in the guest room, shoes scattered across the hallway, a wine glass left sitting on the staircase landing. I ignored it all. Marcy took her notes, complimented the crown molding William had installed back in '92, and we discussed the listing price. Emily stood at the top of the stairs, watching like a gargoyle, her arms crossed, lips pressed into a tight, thin line. "You're pathetic," she muttered loud enough for me to hear. I didn't flinch. I signed the paperwork with Marcy right there in the kitchen and scheduled a professional cleaning crew for the weekend. That's when Emily finally lost it. She stormed down the stairs, stomping like a furious teenager, snatched the wine glass from the staircase and hurled it at the wall near the fridge. It didn't even break. It simply bounced off and rolled under the table like something out of a cheap soap opera. "This is our house now. You're not the queen here anymore," she shouted. Nathan appeared behind her, looking like he hadn't shaved in days. "Mom, can we please just talk?" he begged, that same pleading voice that used to work on me when he was 10. I shook my head. "You forged my name. You tried to steal my home. There's nothing left to discuss." Emily stormed into the living room and began yanking open drawers like she was searching for something else to throw. "I swear to God I'll tell everyone you're senile. You don't even remember things right anymore." Without a word, I pulled a document from my bag and held it up. My fresh medical evaluation conducted privately 2 days earlier at Stanley DeMarco's request. "Certified mentally competent," I said. Signed. Phil. "I figured you might try that." Emily froze for a moment, stunned. Then she lunged forward, pointing her finger, her face twisted in rage. "This is elder abuse. You're abusing us." I almost laughed. "You mean by holding you accountable?" I turned to Nathan. "Your father trusted you. He trusted me. And look what you've done with that trust." Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was condemning. It was the sound of a son realizing he had finally pushed his mother too far. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. "The listing goes live in 48 hours. A formal eviction notice will be served Monday. I suggest you start packing." As I stepped out, Emily muttered something under her breath. As I stepped out the door, I heard Emily muttering something about calling her brother, about lawyers, about public humiliation. But I didn't stop to listen. I got in my car, circled the block, and parked behind the old Walgreens where William and I used to sneak sodas after church. I sat there with the windows cracked, listening to the wind. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt solid, grounded, like my feet had finally found steady earth again. And in that quiet moment I understood something deeply. Real power doesn't come from yelling louder or playing the victim. It comes from truth, from preparation, from knowing exactly what you're owed, and refusing to settle for less. Emily had made her greatest mistake. She thought I was just an old woman with fading memories and no fight left. She didn't know I kept every receipt, every revised will, every voicemail. She didn't know that my silence wasn't fear, it was observation. She had turned herself into the enemy of a woman with nothing left to lose. And that, I knew, was a dangerous place for her to stand. The morning after Emily's outburst, I woke before dawn, brewed a cup of Earl Grey, and sat down at the dining table with a yellow legal pad, mapping out every remaining step before pulling the final lever. I wasn't just aiming to win, I was ensuring they couldn't claw their way back afterward. First up was the bank. I had already frozen the joint accounts, but now I instructed them to close any account Nathan had access to entirely and to reroute everything into a trust under my name, managed by an independent fiduciary. I didn't trust anyone connected to him anymore. The banker, a young woman named Kelsey, glanced over the paperwork, her eyebrows lifting. "Your son forged this?" she asked, wide-eyed. I didn't flinch. "My attorney will be in touch if the bank fails to flag the fraud internally," I said, folding the file with sharp precision. "Thank you for your time." Next came the locks. I had called the locksmith the day before, but now I rescheduled for Saturday morning, the very same day Emily had planned a charity brunch at the house. According to the caterer's website, she had booked the patio, the garden, and even a champagne truck for her networking event. She must have believed I wouldn't dare act before then. That was her second mistake. I confirmed with the sheriff's office that the eviction notice would be hand-delivered Monday morning and checked in with Stanley to ensure every signature had been triple verified. There would be no loopholes for Emily or Nathan to exploit. With everything set in motion, I returned to the house one last time alone. I moved through each room with a notebook, cataloging what was mine, what was left, and what they had damaged. The antique table in the foyer was scratched from bags being dragged across it carelessly. The fireplace mantel was scuffed from God knows what. In the kitchen, the spice rack William had built was coated in grease. But none of it hurt me. If anything, it made the decision even clearer. They hadn't respected the home, the history, or the hands that built it. They treated it like a photo backdrop for their Instagram lives. I paused at the doorway of the master bedroom, where my wedding photo still sat on the dresser, the frame slightly tilted. I straightened it gently. That room had once been filled with warmth. William humming as he brushed his teeth, old records spinning on Sunday mornings. Now it felt cold, like a hotel room long overstayed. I gathered the final financial folders from the hall closet, slipped them into my tote and double-checked the alarm system. I had already changed the passcode, removing Nathan and Emily's access entirely. That evening, I met Rosa for dinner at a little Mexican place off 5th Street. She arrived wearing lipstick and a denim jacket I hadn't seen her wear before. "You look like you just fired half the world," she joked as we sat down. "I might have," I replied, smirking. I told her everything, about the lawyer, the bank, the locksmith, and the brunch party. She laughed when I mentioned the locks were being changed during the actual event. "You're cold," she said, raising her margarita to her lips. "No," I answered, smiling. "I'm finally warm." She leaned in. "You want me there Saturday?" I paused. "I won't stop you." She smiled wide. "I'll bring my camera." That night, back home, I drafted one final document. An open letter to Nathan. Not to Emily. Not to argue or accuse. Simply to explain in writing why I was doing what I was doing. I told him how I had endured years of small humiliations, how I let his wife chip away at me while hoping he would notice. I told him that hearing my own son had forged my name broke something in me that couldn't be repaired. I reminded him of the home we built, the meals we shared, the years I poured my heart into raising him. And I ended the letter simply. "I don't need your permission to protect myself. And you no longer have mine to use my silence as a weapon." I signed it and sealed the envelope. There was no return address, no postscript, no plea for understanding. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months because for the first time I knew exactly what was coming next. And this time it would happen on my terms. Saturday arrived like a steady drumbeat, inevitable and final. By 9 a.m. I was already out the door, wearing a clean blazer, carrying 2 copies of the sale agreement in my bag, and wearing a fresh coat of lipstick I hadn't touched since William's funeral. I reached the house before the champagne truck arrived, and as scheduled, the locksmith was waiting at the curb, tools in hand, eyes glinting with curiosity. I didn't need to explain much. "Everything that matters is already gone," I told him, motioning to the front door. He simply nodded and began removing Nathan and Emily from my house, one lock at a time. Guests had already begun to arrive by the time we were finishing. Early birds with mimosa smiles and charity chatter, unaware that their hostess wouldn't even be able to let them in. I waited in my car until the crowd thickened, watching Emily flit from person to person in her rented floral dress, smiling for photographers like she was about to launch a political campaign. For a brief moment, her eyes caught mine across the lawn. I smiled. He didn't. She had no idea yet, but she was about to learn, and very publicly. I stepped out of my car just as the champagne truck driver approached the locked front door, puzzled and calling for her. Emily rushed over, heels stabbing into the lawn, her voice tight and strained as she realized the key no longer worked. "It's jammed." "I swear it's jammed," she said to no one in particular, trying to sound calm as the murmurs around her grew louder. That's when I stepped forward slowly, like a principal entering a noisy classroom. Every head turned toward me. "It's not jammed," I said, my voice carrying over the music and conversation. "It's been changed." Emily's face went rigid. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed, storming toward me, trying to block the growing audience from seeing. "Hosting the final farewell," I said, pulling a thick manila envelope from my bag. "As of yesterday, this property has been sold. The new owners take possession next month. I suggest everyone grab a drink while you still can." The crowd rippled with confusion, nervous laughter, and awkward silence. Nathan appeared from the side yard, face flushed and exhausted. "Mom, please stop," he said quietly. "You don't have to do this here." I looked at him directly, my voice calm and clear. "Actually, I do. Every time I tried to handle this privately, you ignored me. Every time I spoke softly, you let her scream louder. So now I'm speaking in her language." I handed him the envelope. "Inside are copies of the sale agreement, the eviction notice, and your forged mortgage documents. Don't worry, I haven't pressed charges. Yet." Emily lunged toward me, but Rosa, bless her, appeared out of nowhere, stepping between us, phone raised, recording. "Smile, Emily," she said. "Wouldn't want your donors to miss this." Emily froze, suddenly aware of just how many phones were out, how many people were backing away quietly, clutching their purses and heading toward their cars. Even the champagne truck driver stood awkwardly by the gate. "You vindictive old witch," Emily spat. "You think you've won? Everyone here sees what kind of monster you are." I glanced around. Most of the guests were already leaving. "Guess that's my cue," I said, turning to Rosa. "You ready?" "Always," she replied, linking her arm through mine. We walked down the path, past the people who once laughed at me in that very backyard, past the house where I raised a boy who forgot who built his world, past the woman who thought she could destroy me without consequence. At the sidewalk, I paused briefly and looked back one final time. Emily was crumpled in a patio chair, mascara streaking down her face, while Nathan stood over her holding the envelope, guilt written all over him. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I simply kept walking. This wasn't the end of a party. It was the beginning of my piece. And the best part? I wasn't even done yet. The eviction notice landed on their doorstep Monday morning at 7:42 a.m., hand-delivered by a sheriff's deputy wearing mirrored sunglasses and speaking with a tone even Emily couldn't twist into victimhood. I wasn't there to witness it, but Rosa was. She parked 2 houses down with a muffin and coffee, later telling me, the way she screamed, "You'd think someone stole her kidney." Nathan didn't argue. He stood in the doorway in sweatpants, took the envelope, nodded like a man who finally understood his time was up, and closed the door behind him. By Thursday, the moving truck arrived. Just one truck, not the 3 Emily had once bragged would be needed for all her designer items. By Saturday they were gone. No farewell message, no apology, not even a text from Nathan. They had moved into a rental across town on a cul-de-sac half the size of the home they once claimed as their own. I only knew this because a woman from my old church group happened to live on the same street. She screamed at the movers. The woman whispered over the phone like she was sharing gossip about the mayor. And he just sat on the curb and smoked. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. It was over. The house sat empty for 2 weeks while final inspections were completed. There was no return address, no postscript, no plea for understanding. That night, I slept deeper than I had in years because for the first time I knew exactly what would happen next, and this time it would happen on my terms. Saturday came like a final drumbeat. Steady. I was out the door by 9 a.m., wearing a fresh blazer, 2 copies of the sale agreement tucked into my bag, and lipstick I hadn't worn since William's funeral. I arrived before the champagne truck did. The locksmith was already there waiting at the curb, tools in hand, his eyes quietly curious. "Everything that matters is already gone," I told him as I gestured toward the door. He simply nodded and got to work, removing Nathan and Emily from my home one bolt at a time. By the time he finished, the guests had started arriving, early birds with mimosas and charity smiles, completely unaware that their hostess wouldn't even be able to let them in. I waited in my car until the crowd thickened, watching Emily buzz around the lawn in her rented floral dress, smiling toward photographers like she was running for office. At one point she caught my eye across the yard. I smiled. He didn't. Not yet. I stepped out right as the champagne truck driver walked up to the locked front door, confused, calling for her. Emily rushed over, heels stabbing the grass, trying to stay composed. "It's jammed." "I swear it's jammed," she told no one in particular, her voice growing tight as murmurs rose around her. That's when I moved forward, steady and slow, like a principal entering a noisy classroom. All eyes turned. "It's not jammed," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's been changed." Emily's face went stiff. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed, storming over, trying to block the crowd's view. "Hosting the final farewell," I answered, pulling out the thick manila envelope from my bag. "As of yesterday, this property has been sold. The new owners take possession next month. I suggest everyone enjoy their drinks. It'll be their last on this patio." The guests shifted uncomfortably, some awkwardly laughing, others whispering. Nathan appeared from the side yard, his face red and exhausted. "Mom, please don't do this here," he said quietly. "You don't have to embarrass everyone like this." I looked him in the eye, my voice calm and firm. "Actually, I do. Every time I tried to do this quietly, you ignored me. Every time I spoke softly, you let her scream louder. So now I'm speaking in her language." I handed him the envelope. "Inside are the sale documents, eviction notice, and your forged mortgage paperwork. Don't worry, I haven't pressed charges. Yet." Emily lunged toward me, but Rosa, God bless her, appeared from nowhere, slipping between us, phone raised, recording. "Smile, Emily," she said. "Wouldn't want your donors to miss this." Emily froze, realizing just how many phones were pointed at her, how many people were quietly backing away, slipping out to their cars. "You vindictive old hag," Emily spat. "You think you've won? Everyone here can see what a monster you really are." I glanced around. The patio emptied. The champagne driver stood awkwardly by the gate. "Guess that's my cue," I said, turning to Rosa. "You ready?" "Always," she smiled, laking her arm through mine. We walked away, past the backyard where they once laughed at me, past the house where I raised a boy who forgot who built his world, past the woman who thought she could destroy me without consequence. As I reached the sidewalk, I looked back one last time. Emily was slumped into a patio chair, mascara streaking her face, while Nathan stood above her, envelope in hand, guilt written all over him. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just kept walking. This wasn't the end of a party. It was the beginning of my peace. And I wasn't even done yet. The eviction notice landed Monday morning at 7:42 a.m., hand-delivered by a sheriff's deputy wearing mirrored sunglasses, his voice too firm for Emily to twist into victimhood. I didn't need to be there, Rosa was. She parked 2 houses down, sipping coffee with a muffin, and later told me, the way she screamed, you'd think someone stole her kidney. Nathan didn't argue. He stood at the door in sweatpants, took the envelope, nodded like a man who knew it was over, and closed the door behind him. By Thursday, the moving truck showed up. Just one, not the 3 Emily once bragged about needing for her designer items. By Saturday they were gone. No messages. No apologies. Not even a text from Nathan. They'd moved into a rental across town on a cul-de-sac half the size of the home they once claimed. I only knew because a woman from my church lived on the same street. She screamed at the movers, she whispered to me like small-town gossip. And he just sat on the curb smoking. I said nothing. It was done. While the house sat empty for inspections, I walked through it one final time. Alone, slowly, like visiting an old friend in a hospital bed. The air smelled like lemon polish and faint regret. I ran my hand along the edge of the fireplace, the worn groove on the stair rail where Nathan once slid down in his pajamas, the patched hallway wall where William insisted our crooked wedding photo looked more romantic. I sat in the now empty living room, breathing in the quiet. No anger. No tears. Just clean. 2 days later the sale closed. Marcus and Shelby Foster. A young black couple with a newborn and a rescue dog. He was an electrician. She worked in graphic design from home. They'd written a letter with their offer. "We've dreamed of a house like this," Shelby had written. Not just for the space, for the feeling. That sentence alone made me choose them. They didn't want it for status. They wanted it to build a life. At the signing, I shook their hands and left the keys in a small glass bowl by the door. "You'll love the kitchen in spring," I told Shelby. "The morning light reaches all the way to the sink." She smiled and squeezed my hand like we were passing a torch. That night, I drove back to my new place. A small condo near the library, walking distance to the bakery and community garden. No fireplace. No guest wing. No outdated crown molding. But peace. Freedom. And it was mine. I unpacked slowly, lit a candle William once bought at a Christmas market, and finally opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for years. Perhaps for this moment. Rosa stopped by around 8 with takeout and a bottle of soda. We sat on my balcony watching the city hum below. "You did it," she said. "You didn't just win, you freed yourself." I nodded, staring up at the night sky. I didn't realize how heavy it all was until I finally let it go. I kept trying to carry that house, that family, like it still was what it used to be. But it wasn't. And neither was I. She raised her cup. "To never letting anyone treat us like the help again." I laughed, then paused, remembering how it all started, the insult that triggered everything. "You look like my maid," Emily had said. Funny. The woman she tried to compare me to, Rosa, turned out to be more family than either of them ever were. In the end, it wasn't the title that defined me. It was the truth. And I held it all now. Documented, notarized, signed, sealed, delivered. 2 weeks after the Fosters moved in, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in a decade. Rearranging my bookshelves. Not out of necessity, because I finally had the energy to care about the order of things again. I was halfway through alphabetizing the fiction section when Rosa appeared at my door, grinning wide, a bottle of mid-shelf red wine in one hand, a manila folder tucked under her arm. "Got something to show you," she said, stepping in like she owned the place. And honestly, at that point she kind of did. She placed the wine on the counter, opened the folder, and slid a glossy document across to me. A small business license under her name, Rosa's Home Harmony, Cleaning and Organization Services. I blinked, then laughed. "You went legit?" "Not just legit," she grinned. "I've got 5 regular clients, a part-time girl I'm training, and 2 referrals waiting." She touched the document. "Turns out people will gladly pay for what I've been doing for scraps for years." I smiled and said softly, "You used to say you'd never work for yourself, that you didn't know how." She nodded, her voice more serious. "I didn't, until I watched you burn your whole life down and start over. You reminded me I'm not someone in the background. I'm the reason some of these houses even run." I poured 2 glasses of wine and handed her one. "You're the reason I didn't fall apart," I said. "You pulled me out of the fog before I even knew I was in it." She sipped, then leaned in slightly. "You know, Emily tried to call me twice. Left voicemails, pretending like nothing ever happened. Said she wanted to make peace, maybe talk about opportunities." I raised my brows. "You're kidding." Rosa shook her head. "She must have thought I'd be desperate. But once you learn your worth, you don't go back to beg for a seat at a rotted table." I laughed, harder than I had in months. A full honest laugh. Rosa raised her glass. "To self-employment. To boundaries," I added. "To dignity," she said. "To silence broken," I finished. We clinked glasses. And in that moment, it wasn't just 2 women toasting over wine. It was a ceremony. An exorcism. A release. Later that night, after Rosa left and the dishes were washed, I sat on my balcony, thinking how strange it was that the person who ended up beside me wasn't blood. Wasn't someone I raised, but someone I once paid to mop my floors. And yet she was the only one who truly saw me. The only one who never asked me to shrink or disappear or be grateful just to be tolerated. Rosa hadn't just built a business. She had built herself a spine. And watching her made me want more too. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about chaos. It was simply about building a life that felt like mine again. I pulled out my old notebook, the one I used for grocery lists, flipped to a clean page, and at the top I wrote one word: next. Beneath it I made a short list. First, join the local book club. Second, visit the art museum downtown, the one I always said I'd see. And finally, sign up for those watercolor classes William used to tease me about. He once told me I'd be dangerous if I ever stopped putting everyone else first. And maybe now I was. Not cruel, just firm, steady, and deliberate. Rosa was right. Once you recognize your worth, you never go back. And I wasn't going to. One Thursday afternoon, with the windows open and wind chimes softly clinking like a quiet exhale, I sat down to write a letter. Not to Nathan, certainly not to Emily. I'd already said everything I needed to say to them with my silence and my signatures. This letter was for my grandchildren, Leah and Thomas. Two bright-eyed kids who didn't ask to be born into anyone's mess. Two children who, the last time I saw them, had hugged me without hesitation, without judgment. I waited to write until the noise had settled and my own thoughts had stopped spinning, because I didn't want the words to come from anger. I wanted them to come from truth. I told them about the house. About how it wasn't just walls and rooms, it was memories. The chipped tile where their dad once threw a basketball inside and shattered a lamp. The sticky kitchen drawer that always jammed because I insisted on storing extra batteries there, like a superstition. The garden where their grandfather once grew the most stubborn tomatoes on earth. I told them it was okay to feel confused, hurt, or even angry at me. I told them the story their parents might someday spin, about the house being stolen, wouldn't be true. But I didn't ask them to choose sides. I simply asked them to remember that love doesn't disappear just because people fail at showing it. I tucked in two photographs. One of William and me on the front porch, taken in 1989. And one from Leah's last birthday party, where she wore a paper crown and made me pinky promise to always bring extra sprinkles next time. I wrote that they could visit anytime they wanted. No pressure, no test of loyalty, just an open door, cookies in the jar, and a grandmother who still remembered how to play Go Fish. When I sealed the envelope, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt peaceful, like I'd gently closed a chapter without needing to slam it shut. That weekend, I donated the last of William's books to the local library and treated myself to my first community watercolor class. I wasn't good. Not yet. But there was something freeing about watching the colors run together. No rules, no outlines, just motion and instinct. That night, I made spaghetti for one, lit a candle, and curled up in bed with a mystery novel, the window cracked open and a cup of mint tea resting on the nightstand. No texts. No drama. No waiting for another shoe to drop. Just quiet. Just me. Rosa texted me later that evening. A photo of her new business cards and a screenshot of a 5-star review from one of her clients. She saved my house and my sanity. I smiled and texted back. She does that. I thought about Emily sometimes, but never for long. Usually just in moments where silence settled heavy and old memories tried to sneak back in. I didn't hate her. I pitied her. Because a woman who builds her entire life on control and appearances never truly feels safe, even when she believes she's won. As for Nathan, I wished him peace. I hoped that someday he'd grow a spine, maybe even remember what it means to be a son again. But that wasn't my job anymore. That part was finished. I had protected what mattered. I had reclaimed what was mine. And more importantly, I had built something entirely new, not from bitterness or spite, but from the solid ground of finally knowing who I was, even after others tried so hard to bury it. That night, after washing the dishes, I turned off the lights, climbed into bed, and felt the warmth of small, ordinary joy wrap around me. In the quiet, I whispered into the dark, "I'm home." And for the first time in a long, long time, I meant it.